Welcome to the Personal Protection Podcast with your host, Lee Hasdell at the Off-Grid Dojo in association with Critical Performance and Close Solutions. Tonight, we'll feature our special guest, Mr. Mees Rozen from Get Ready to Fight. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello. How's it going?
Good.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Now, for tonight's podcast, obviously it's about personal protection. So we're going to be exploring the world of personal protection. And there's a good reason why I use the term personal protection as opposed to martial arts. And that's because it kind of covers a broader scope. Well, in actual fact, the martial arts is also very, very broad. My teachers always used to say that for the beginner, the martial arts takes place in the dojo, but for the more advanced, it takes place in the world every day, every hour, every second. So I want to hand over to Mees to basically give an introduction as to what you're about, what your martial arts and so on and so forth, and what the Get Ready to Fight is all about. So over to you.
Sure. Well, my name is Mees Rozen. I'm originally from the Netherlands. Came to the UK some time ago. I'm a martial artist. I'm also a musician, but I won't bore you too much with that here today.
When you say musician, you a singer or you play?
Yeah, well, I've always had two passions in my life: music and martial arts. I always wanted to become a musician when I was young.
Yeah.
And ended up starting a martial arts academy, which I ran here in East London for 15 years. And then that ended because of, the situation in 2020.
Yeah.
And so in the meantime, I kind of picked up music again. So at the moment, I'm doing both. But here today to talk about martial arts and self-protection.
Yeah, excellent. Okay. So is there anything else you want to add to what's got you to this position here, and maybe a little bit about just an overview as to what martial arts and stuff like that?
Well, I've always been a martial arts enthusiast since I was a kid, and I suppose one thing different from me than others was that I never trained, got my belt, and then settled within, the style or the system to then become, I don't know, an instructor or, someone with a fancy certificate to show off. I always had a hunger for more, and I never felt satisfied about, getting answers to the questions that I felt were important. So what happened basically is, I trained for a couple of years, 3 to 5 years. I got a black belt and I moved on. And I started again, 3 to 5 years, another black belt, and I moved on. 3 to 5 years, another black belt, and I moved on. And I kept on feeling, fairly dissatisfied with the answers that I was given or was not given at the higher levels. When you start, you have the impression, or you've been given the impression that the answers will come at some point, and then it was always a bit disappointing that they didn't come. Yeah. And for some reason, I always kept digging. I never had this feeling of like, well, I put 5 years of my life in it. It's too late to to do something else now. On the contrary, I always felt kind of enthusiastic to start again and to look elsewhere and to corroborate what I had learned with other things, and so that's kind of evading your question about what my background exactly is. So I'd like to say I've done everything and I've been everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's given me a position. I've been able to take a step back and look at it from the outside rather than
so being objective
system. Which is kind of limiting, and then then you got the the politics and the position that you have achieved, and the ego and all these things, and once it becomes a job, the money, and so I suppose for me, it's been a luxury to have not been caught up in that game. And that, that gives me some kind of perspective, I think, that could be useful for others to, to hear and to absorb, so that they don't have to go through that process.
Yeah.
And, they can get, hopefully with a bit of direction, they can get straight to the point and to the good stuff.
Well, very often the martial arts actually becomes the very things it's not meant to be. The opposite,
totally agree, yes.
the ego, the politics, all these things that we're trying to actually get away from. Quite often we end up involved with that. I found that myself with a lot of the stuff that I did in the past.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think these times are great in that respect, because we can leave that all behind. We can leave the organizations behind, and the politics behind, and the styles and the systems and the egos and the personalities, and we can leave it all behind, and we can kind of redefine, the what's important, the essence, because now we really need to, we need to get familiar with the essence. We need to understand the functionality. It's no longer something that we use to, to win a competition or to get a certificate that we can put on our wall. There's more of an urgency now to get to grips with the, with the essence and with the fundamental skills. And so that's why, that's why I set up the Get Ready to Fight channel, which is on Telegram. And, that's why I refer to what we do as emergency self-protection, to emphasize, the urgency of getting to grips with this material and being able to, to put it into action, so to speak.
Sure. So as let's say a percentage ratio, what percentage do you do, say, weapons, striking, grappling, on and so forth?
Well, okay. So because I've been running the academy for 15 years, and I was always responsible for the lesson structure. I've invested a lot of time also in, what is the best way to deliver, the lessons that we want people to learn. And so what I've done for this specific initiative is actually divided it into 3 different modules. And I start with the short stick.
Sure.
And that is striking based mainly, right?
Yeah.
And then the second module is striking without a stick, with any body part. So fists, elbows, knees, shoulder, head, hips.
When you say sticks, are we talking like Filipino style or?
Well, no, not really. No, in fact, I try to stay away from any references to styles, and I would argue that we need to, we to a certain extent we need to leave that behind, and that doesn't mean that we can't learn from those styles and systems, but it means that we kind of need to restart our own, our own definitions and the place where we come from, rather than looking at existing systems that are embedded into certain cultures, and come with a lot of cultural and political stuff.
Yeah.
I think we need to strip everything away from it and come to redefine kind of the a core or an essence or a fundamental practice that lies at the base of that, and so I stay away from any references to existing styles and systems, and I would suggest that we use geometrical definitions to establish our first principles.
Yeah, so it's more universal.
Yeah, more universal and less personal, less defined by people and personalities, and more defined by something, like you say, something universal, something that we can all agree on without going into stylistic features.
Yeah, on my path, I always had a little bit of an issue with regards to tradition, or what they call tradition. Now, I always thought that, like, one man's tradition is another man's innovation, or was another man's innovation. So a lot of these traditional styles where they're taught as in it must retain the same as the creator of the system. I've always found that very limiting. Now, if you look at the characters or the personalities of the founders, they were actually very innovative and non-traditional. Otherwise, they wouldn't have ever been able to create something new. Because if they just carried on doing what they were taught, there would never be the possibility for something new to come into their technique or their philosophy or their training to actually evolve. So, like I say, I've always personally had a bit of an issue with tradition. To me, if I'm doing the same as what they did 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago, then maybe I'm doing something slightly wrong. Because there has to be some form of evolution to match the environment or the current times, or depend on the technology or the weaponry and so on and so forth. But in saying that, a lot of the concepts and the essence remains the same. There's definitely a constant flow between.
Yeah, of course, but that's because the geometry doesn't change. And so that's why I would like to focus on that, and that's why I use kind of a geometrical definitions to set up what we're doing.
So you mean in like everybody has 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head, a left and a right?
Well, so maybe it's a good moment to kind of describe that concept. So
sure.
So we start with the stick, and one of the reasons I start with the stick is because there's only one way you can strike with a stick, and that is with a stick, right? So the principles that we use in striking with the stick are the same as the principles we use when striking with the body. But just because I can strike with a fist and an elbow or an arm or a hand, it becomes complex to see that it's all the same thing. Whilst if we have a stick, everything's the stick, so it's easier to see that it's all pretty simple stuff. And then we can, once we understand those concepts, we can transfer that to striking with any body part, and we can recognize that in fact we're doing the same thing as with the stick.
Would you say that's like a type of focus? Yeah.
No, so I'm talking mainly about angles and directions. So I would like you to. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Leonardo da Vinci man drawing.
Sure. Yeah.
It's a man with his arms to the side, basically encircled by a big circle.
Sure.
And so I would like you to kind of imagine a 2-dimensional figure in front of you, with a circle drawn around it.
Yeah.
And then kind of appreciate that the outside circle could be defined as the defensive perimeter.
Okay.
Yep. So we have, we have you imagine a circle around your own body, and that is, it's the border. It's the border of your body, in the same way that your house might have a fence or a country has a border. Yep. And so one way to attack the body is to attack the border, to strike into the border at different angles.
Sure.
And so that's what I refer to by geometry. So okay. If you imagine the circle and you place and you define the top as north, then if I would come in with an overhead strike, I call it a strike on the north side of the defensive perimeter.
Yeah.
Yes. If I strike at 3 o'clock, or on a horizontal line that you draw through the circle, and I approach it from right to left, which would be 3 o'clock on a 3 o'clock on the clock. Yep. I have a 3 o'clock strike or an eastern strike. Yep. And I can do that for all the different wind directions. So north, east, south, and west. Those are your 4 basic angles.
Sure.
Right. So I can strike at north. I can strike sideways on the right, east. I can do it reverse way around on the west. Or I can strike you upward from the south. So sure. That's your 4 basic angles there.
Yeah.
And then we add another 4 for the diagonals. So that is your northeast, your northwest, your southeast, and your southwest angles. And so we have a total of 8 angles at which we can strike the defensive perimeter of your body.
Sure.
And that's important for two reasons. It's important for our defensive principles, because understanding that we can struck at those different angles gives us our basic understanding or a basic compass to start, best negotiate those attacks. But it's also important for the strikes itself. And whether that is because we use those strikes as counters after being attacked, or whether we use those strikes like preemptively in an offensive way. Those are the basic angles that we can strike someone with a stick.
Sure.
And so that's regardless of style or system or whatever it is. We're just looking at the human body, and we appreciate that you can hit it from the top, from the sides, from the bottom, and on diagonals. And so that's pretty simple story.
Yeah, because one of the major problems with personal protection, and in fact any form of conflict or combat, is that what we're generally trying to do is trying to calm the chaos as teachers. So if somebody's totally inexperienced of being in a fight or a combative situation, they're going to be overwhelmed with the possibilities of what is coming at them. When in actual fact, when you train after a while, I don't know if you find this, when you train after a while, you start to realize that there's not actually that many ways that something can come at you.
No, exactly. And so I think so it's very important to map that out. And I've noticed over the years that people also, they have, because it does need some commitment. Let's not beat around the bush. Okay, it can't be just delivered through a chat, and it can't be just delivered within a 3-hour session. Sure. You're going to have to commit to it to an extent, to feed to firstly understand the principles and the concepts, but then to make it yours, and to make it something that you can apply instinctively, something that literally becomes yours. Yeah. And so I think, one of the reasons why I would like to, define the concept is so that people understand, what it entails, how much it is, So, so if we can ascertain that, there are 8 angles at which you can be struck, and all these angles come with, their specific ways to respond to that. Then that is already something that, I hope people would become enthusiastic about and say like, oh, okay, well, that's not so much, So
what you're trying to do is you're trying to get people to focus on what they can do rather than what they don't know.
Absolutely, because it's such a minefield. With all the different styles out there, and some are on the ground, and some clinch, and some do impact only, and this and that, and for me, it's all, I have it all cleared up in my mind, but I should not forget that there's been quite a bit of study prior to coming to those understandings. So
I mean, there's one thing knowing how to fight or how to protect yourself, and then there's another thing in how we communicate that to the student or the
exactly. And so that kind of ties in with another problem, that is that a lot of martial arts have been founded by, certainly more earlier versions, by good fighters, right? But a good fighter is not necessarily a good pedagogical person, right? So on the contrary, it's often like, you often see this thing like people either go for the competitive career or for the teaching career. You see, I mean, being a good fighter or being a strongman doesn't necessarily mean that you know how to define what it is that you're doing. You might just be a natural, or whatever it is. I mean, they're just not the same thing. Whilst in our age, or certainly in the age that we're just kind of finishing off, a lot of people look up to people because they're strong, or they've been successful, or they're aggressive, or whatever it is. But they don't choose a martial arts school because of its cleverly defined pedagogical structure.
I mean, it's quite common that you can come across a very good fighter, a very good person at personal protection, but they may not necessarily be a great teacher.
No, exactly.
Yeah. That is something, because I know a lot of, let's say in the combat sports, they reach a level of, I don't know, championship or multiple titles. So people will be attracted to them for training. But in fact, they may lack some of the skills to be able to communicate the techniques, especially at a beginner level as well.
Yeah, and I think it goes even further. So, one of the problems I see with, joining a school of, a strong fighter or somebody with, with a charisma or something like that, is that you'll find that people try to, people will set their goals to becoming like that person, you see.
Sure.
And so that kind of goes in against, what I believe is the goal of, of this type of training, which is really, find out more about yourself, right? You should be given a pathway to develop yourself, to develop your own strengths, to develop, your own natural mechanics, rather than, to become a clone of, the person that happens to be running the class where you are. Yeah. And, I think that's a really unfortunate situation. And I think this is a real good time to break with those practices. I think now is a time to, to take the power back, on all fronts. And so that includes, on the front of your own skills development. They're your skills. You want to find someone who can tell you the concepts, or who can give you the key to unlock the mechanisms, and then you want to start working yourself. And so that's also what I try to do with the channel. I'm not profiling myself as a teacher. I think people should be their own teachers. Sure. I just want to share my understanding with people, so they can then start teaching themselves. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, I've been looking at some of your stuff, and my understanding is that you try to empower the students, as opposed to, I don't know, hey, look at me, look how great I am at my techniques. It's more a case of empowering the student for self-empowerment and their own self-development.
It's true, but I think it's really important, in right now, it's really important that we start understanding things ourselves. We need to be able to, to process information ourselves. It's become very clear to me that if you lack that skill, if you have for some reason come to to rely on other people's opinions, or other people's I don't know, guides, or other people's whatever it is, I think you're a bit in trouble. As a martial arts instructor, I feel for me the right thing to do is to get rid of that old concept of teaching people. And and inspire people to with the right tools to become their own instructors, and to become their own to become the contents of their own studies, or the study of their own practice. I think that's really essential. And the other thing about it is that one of the things that I always wondered about martial arts was, everybody was always talking about, physical, mental, spiritual. But because we live in a Western world, and, we're heavily influenced by kind of, our scientific approach to, to viewing the world, the spiritual part was never well defined, right? Because it went way beyond, what we in the West accept to be part of our reality. And so for me, again, I think the spirituality wasn't really there anymore with most martial arts systems. Again, because people were aspiring to become like their coach or like their instructor. You're going to have to the arts have to be a process of self-discovery, for it to open doors to, spiritual realms, like, you're going to have to connect with yourself, and you're going to have to, it's going to have to be, an introspective journey to an extent. Otherwise, those, those layers or those aspects of the arts will just not come through, I think.
Yeah. Was you ever inspired by Bruce Lee? I mean, what's your take on Bruce Lee in terms of as an inspiration?
No,
I'm not going to ask the question. How would Bruce Lee do in the MMA or UFC now? I'm talking more as
the only thing I can say about it is that I recently, I don't know, for some reason, saw one of his films that I must have seen many times as a child, and I was shocked about the aggression levels. I thought it was actually really a horrible film. Like
in terms of violence.
I don't know, maybe it's because I'm a bit older, or I don't know. I think the other aspect for a martial art to be linked to any form of spirituality is that you're going to have to follow the non-aggression principle. In my opinion, you can't deliver martial arts, or you can't safely engage in martial arts training or self-protection training of a physical kind without understanding and appreciating the non-aggression principle. Because otherwise it just becomes something else.
I always remember when I was in my final school, the final year, they played, I believe it was Enter the Dragon at lunchtime. Sorry, just before lunchtime for our lunch break. Now, I went to an all-boys school. So can you imagine, like, we're all around about 16 years old. We watched Enter the Dragon, and then we had lunch break. Now, you should have seen the playground. It was carnage. It was mayhem. We were beating the crap out of each other.
Well, obviously, I mean, it had a big, it inspired a whole generation or two or three even, to look into martial arts. So that's good. But I think
the reason why I mentioned Bruce Lee is because of his philosophy about discarding what is useless, retaining what is useful, and basically what is essentially yours to add to the mix. And that was something, because he was kind of like almost the first mixed martial artist, and he broke away from a lot of the traditions for the most part. So that was why I mentioned Bruce Lee, because I thought he might have been some kind of influence.
Yeah, no, I think we're way past that. I think we're at the dawn of a new age, and I think self-protection, as you said in the introduction talk, it's a very broad subject.
Sure.
We're not only talking about physical self-protection. There's all kinds of things that are going on that we that we need to protect ourselves against. But as a self-protection instructor or self-protection person, that's where I think I can add some value to people's perception. But I think we're way past those days, and we really need to let go of these idols and these egos and these personalities, and we really need to come to grips with the fundamentals. And there's different ways to define that, right? I like the geometrical explanation because for me it's really clear, and I hope that I can explain that in a way that people go like, wow, yeah, that sounds cool, never thought about it like that. We're talking about eight directions plus one. We're talking about nine, a total of 9 strikes. And so effectively we're looking at getting to grips with those 9 strikes, again, both for offensive and defensive reasons. And so I would say to people, give me 9 meetings with you, and I'll run you through them all. and then off you go with your friends or your colleagues or your family, and get to grips with it. And and I'll speak to you again in a month's time, and we'll see how I can help you any further. And I think that's a very, to me, that sounds like a very, certainly as someone who's for years and years and years chased all these goals within, style-based systems. I mean, I would have loved to, when I was a kid, someone to come to me and say like, well, listen, I've got 9 tricks for you. Here you go. They're yours. See what you can do with it, and check back in with me in a month's time, and we'll take it from there. I think that's an approach that we really need to start taking now. People really need to need to maybe be forced to start thinking for themselves. And so I think that's the way forward.
Have you found with your own personal journey that you trained in lots of different things, experimented, traveled maybe, but now you've reached a point where it's actually become very simple, like the concepts or the principles are essentially the same? Or would you say that, do you look for the similarities? So for instance, with your geometric 8-strike principles, could you say that you're not focusing so much on that it's a stick? It could actually be a pool cue, baseball bat, hammer fist. Is that?
No, exactly. Yes. Yeah. No.
So you don't need
totally
to learn.
right.
Yeah, you don't need to learn like a whole new system because it's a stick, a whole new system because it's a edge weapon.
No, yeah, totally. No, yeah, I was actually going to give you that example. Let's say the northeast angle, which is kind of the most common one that somebody would strike you with. It doesn't really matter whether somebody picks up a chair and kind of launches it at you at a diagonal angle at your head,
sure,
or whether it's a stick, or whether it's a haymaker style hook punch, or a rich hand, or whether they're just diving onto you. The thing is, we want to identify that angle, and we want to through body movement position ourselves in the best way, countering that attack, and to put us in a position where we safely can counter or get out there. And so that's exactly right. It goes. I start with the stick because it's simple and everything looks like a stick. All the angles are stick attacks with the at those different angles. But you're absolutely right. It really doesn't matter what's at the end of the stick, so to speak.
Yeah, which really simplifies things. With my students, I generally teach like as an example. If you look at somebody, there's 3 levels. There's the lower part, the middle part, the upper part, and you got the right and the left, which in essence gives you 6 areas of either attack or defense, or that they can attack you with. So what I try and do, I really try and calm my students down, because while they're standing there in the beginning, when they envisage a fight or a past experience of a fight, it's just been complete chaos for them. They literally just had to cover up because they didn't know what was coming. So one of the exercises I do is I get them to actually start to look at themselves and look at their opponent there's only 6 areas of a person. So, and then you got the left and the right.
Exactly,
it's not absolutely true, but what you're trying to do is you're just trying to get the concept of simplification in order to get rid of some of the chaos that is involved.
Yeah, exactly. You need to, exactly. Well, this thanks for mentioning that, but because that's what I'm trying to do. It's exactly the same thing. And so funny enough, I don't use logos or stuff like that, but if I would use a logo, I would use an inverse, or maybe I should say reversed chaos symbol. The chaos symbol, it's a 8 arrows, moving outwards from a central point. And so, the diagram that I use to best, visualize the concept that I'm talking about is is that same thing, but it's the other way around. So it's 8 arrows pointing into the center of the circle, to the core or to the heart or to the center point.
Yeah.
And the center point itself is actually the ninth strike, which is the it's not the strike to the defense perimeter, to the outside border of our body, but it's a poke or a jab, to the center of our body, right, to the heart, so to speak. And that can be literally or not literally. And so, the idea with that again is that by creating that concept, it provides some, it provides order. It gives you order rather than chaos.
Yeah.
So that's I'm completely with that. It's important to to give people a roadmap or a concept that that covers broadly speaking all possibilities. And then of course in reality things are not so neat. But once you start working with those 9 different strikes, and you start learning how to position yourself and how to use your feet and your body to best facilitate your own position.
Do you think this plays into the mindset of a student? So by giving them a map, it actually helps to give a better mindset for what they potentially will engage in terms of the chaos or the attack. Because another part of personal protection is that only the attacker knows the time and sometimes the place of the attack.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a big problem.
Yeah.
So, of course, the attacker normally is prepared. They're fired up. They know what's going to happen. They've got their bodies or they've got their tools. And you're being surprise attacked. So you're at a big disadvantage.
Yeah. So do you think mindset has a lot to play in the?
Well, the mind is a difficult. It's a difficult thing to predict. It's. I think experience is important. You're going to have to. You're going to have to do the work. You can't expect things to just come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing that we need to change. We need to start. We need to start working these concepts. Like, a big part of the the mess we're in today is because we've lost our connection with nature, right?
Sure.
And in nature, for example, tiger cubs or lion cubs, they play fight through their younger years. They don't do much else, and so it really helps them develop into mature beings, right?
Yeah.
And it define, and it's more than that. It will partly define them as mature animals, and so we have been those opportunities have been largely taken away from us. For reasons that for all kinds of reasons. But so we grow up not having had the luxury of doing that, and so that is going to affect our personalities and who we are, and it cuts into our again our connection with nature. It cuts in our spirituality. We become less familiar with who we are. We haven't been able to develop those skills. We haven't been able to make those connections. We haven't been able to to go through those developments. And I think that's probably an important aspect of why certain things are looking today as they are looking, and why certain people reacting in certain ways. And so I think that comes back to the mindset. It's like you can't put that back into a mature person if they've never done that before. But I mean, if you don't try, it's definitely not going to happen. So I would say get ready and let's do it. Let's set some definitions. Something we can work with. Take in consideration safety and a couple of other things. And and let's do it. Let's get those connections back. Let's connect with those aspects of ourselves that we might not have been able to experience.
Yeah. Well, this might be a good opportunity for me to ask one of the questions that I'm going to be asking all of the guests on this podcast. Now, part of the concept of this podcast is to keep it free flowing and actually free from set structure. But I do have a number of questions that I will be asking every guest. And one of them is nature versus nurture. Now, what that means in context with personal protection and the martial arts is how much of it is nature and how much of it is nurture, as in how much can train and affect the capabilities of a student, as opposed to, because some people are just born naturally able to protect themselves or to fight, and some totally aren't. There's like a spectrum. So I'm always interested to hear from other instructors as to how much importance they place on, say, genetics or nature, and how much can be changed through training and nurturing of a student.
Yeah, well, exactly. So my answer, cheekily would be, as coaches or as, people with a background in these things that make themselves available to help others. I think we should try to, nurture the nature in people. We need to help them connect with natural mechanics. There's no point, so then we can kind of bypass it. Whatever the answer exactly is to your question, if we can reconnect to nature, then at worst what we have is some lost time. But we can pick it up here and now, and we can start developing those natural responses and natural mechanics and natural connections. After the fact. Yeah, you could ask, is that possible or not? Yeah, I think it's possible. It's like movement. Like we're all we're used to sitting in chairs and in front of computers, so people become stiff, and they as instructors we know that beginners often don't know how to move naturally, right?
Sure.
So it's our job to reconnect them through by leading them or by giving them the right clues and examples to reconnect them with themselves, and so we can do that. If it can do that, then we can actually nourish the nature that is still within them. It's just because of different habits and different lifestyles, it's just become something that's dormant.
Yeah, I found after teaching children's martial arts program for around about 5 or 6 years, I found that I was correcting. The first thing that I started off correcting was the posture of the youngsters. I mean, talking like from 6 years upwards, because a lot of them didn't fully understand how to stand up straight, because they got used to sort of looking down and with their phones and devices. Now, for us of a certain age, we only started using the devices to the capacity that we do in the latter years of our life. So we'd already developed a good structure. Whereas the youngsters, they're introduced to mobile technology from the age of 3, 4, 5, 6, and they actually spend their time looking down, which is actually not very good for personal protection, because of the awareness, the natural ability to be aware, and the use of the 5 senses, which in my opinion is our natural personal protection system. The 5 senses, it's almost been taken away, so it's looking down, and the awareness is closing right down. So one of the things I worked hard on was to get them to actually stand up straight and be aware of their environment.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree.
Yeah. Okay, so with regards to the training, because I'm very keen with this podcast to get everything as current as possible. So at the moment, you've got a training academy, or what do you do?
No, so my academy closed down in March 2020. I went online. Yep. I was one of the first to go on to Zoom, which I did for a couple of months, kind of concluding that didn't work. And kind of over the year, I decided not to, not to continue with the academy, basically because, I don't, I don't feel comfortable with the restrictions, and I think, for close quarter practices, I mean, what's the point? It just doesn't work. For me, the situation has become, the environment within gyms has become not a good environment for, the things that I want to be doing. So I came to that decision a while ago, and then started realizing that, as hard it was for me for a while, that it also gave me an opportunity to get rid of some things that I actually was not so happy with, and so then I'm talking again about my role as an instructor. I always felt that I was spending a lot of energy onto getting people to move, and I kind of reflected on that, and decided that I didn't think that was something that I wanted to continue. I don't think it was in my advantage. I don't think it was really serving my clients.
Do you think the clubs are going to be locked down again?
Sorry, say it again.
Do you think the martial art academies and clubs and gyms, do you think they're going to be shut down?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think we're in the words of some of the engineers, behind, societal changes. We're at the start of what they call the fourth industrial revolution, and so that's a digitalization of society. So I mean, I think we will go to to some kind of elimination of person-to-person instruction. And certainly close quarter style, person-to-person, training. I think in their minds it's all going to be holograms and online stuff. And so I don't see why I should be hanging around within those places. I don't think that's.
So you think there's a countdown to the elimination of say martial art academies?
Well, I think I see, there's of course lots of ways how you can look at it and how you can define these developments, but I've always been intrigued by the mechanization of society, with the previous industrial revolutions, and the reason I've always been interested in that was because it signified a big change within the educational formats of martial arts, right? So before the mechanization of society, you just had a teacher or a master or something like that, or an expert, with a couple of apprentice students. And then with the mechanization, and the introduction of mass education, that's that changed everything. So that was a big departure from person to person instruction. We see that we don't only see that, of course, in martial arts. I mean, the same thing happened in, I don't know, manufacturing or carpentry. Nowadays we have IKEA, right? I mean, there's not many people that still hand carve chairs, right? So that gave us a lot of access to a lot of furniture, but it killed the trade. And I think one of the reasons why martial arts has become so empty and so disconnected from the things that it really should be teaching is because that the mechanization of society through the earlier industrial revolution. And so now we're in the next industrial revolution, and so I don't think it's hard to see how that is going to change everything again. So we're going, and so rather than this the mass instruction and education systems, I think that's all going to change to digital structures. And I mean, the schools have already, of course, implemented online learning. I think that's
Well,
certainly something that's going to be further developed and slowly phased out, the old style. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So that leads nicely to another one of my questions that I will be asking all of the guests with regards to personal protection, stroke martial arts in the future. So what is on the cards for that? Because one thing I noticed, say, for instance, with the lockdowns, now potentially in the future, we could be living in a world that we're not necessarily permanently locked down through force, but just through either habit and convenience, because everything is at home and we work from home. We don't need to go out. Food's delivered. So it could actually end up becoming more of a habit. Now, I noticed during the lockdowns that when I went out and about, because I carried on working as normal, that there was nobody around. Like there was nobody to get attacked. There was nobody, in some ways people were safer. The only thing I would add to that is, so for instance, say people that commit crimes of breaking into houses, they found it difficult because everybody was at home. So they started to look elsewhere for crime. But if it was for a prolonged period, it would mean that those people that would break into a house are going to have to start saying, well, we're going to have to break into a house when there's people there. So we're going to have to actually deal with those people. So in one way, crime is eliminated, but in another way is actually made worse, because most people that break into houses don't want to deal with a person in the house, but they will if they have to. But I think it was an idea I had that if it was a prolonged societal change where people stayed at home all the time, that home invasions where the person's at home is going to be more than less. So
yeah, well, I mean, obviously we don't know exactly how things are all going to play out, but I mean, I think there will always be a need for self-protection practice. It's like the fact that the world mechanized after the first and second industrial revolution doesn't mean that there was no person-to-person passing on of information in more traditional ways at all anymore. So I think there's always it's a choice that we have to make. Are we gonna are we gonna adapt to those requirements and circumstances, or are we gonna try to to do things differently? I mean, I think a subject as self-protection, I mean, it just can't be effectively delivered through online learning. It's a hands-on thing. You're gonna have to it's like swimming without water. It's like you're gonna have to have water in the pool to swim. So it doesn't really matter whether swimming pools are illegal or not. I mean, you want to be delivering swimming modules, you're gonna have to have water.
Yeah. So would you say it's fair to say that martial arts, personal protection, whatever we want to call it, it becomes, or it is more of an attitude as opposed to you can do this, you can do that. So it's more of an approach with an attitude towards everyday existence. And it could actually become in terms of finding food, if there's a food shortage, which is something that's being speculated upon, being able to find food could, for some people of society, even somewhere to live could be a problem too.
Well, I think I just think the scenario that you painted earlier just now about the society becoming unfavorable to martial arts practice. I mean, that might be so. I would rather focus on the increased need for people to incorporate self-protection protocols within their daily or weekly routine. I think that's I think that's much more important. I think now is the time where people need to, in whichever way they see fit, reconnect with themselves and reconnect with, reconnect with these kind of practices that, can offer them solutions in difficult times. I mean, there's loads of ways to look at it. Like even in the pre 2020 days, martial arts was always heralded as something to make you fit, and the mind, body, and the spirit. It's like, I mean, people need times have been quite dark, and they might return again. So people need to keep themselves positive and mentally strong and physically strong. I mean, if there ever was a time that we need to be in good health, it's now. I mean, the hospital services are shaky. I mean, I can't get in touch with my GP. There's staff shortages. It's like now is the time to focus on our health and to reconnect with ourselves. To connect, the physical body and mental health, and to connect with nature and get the spiritual thing going. So I focus on that, and I ride that wave rather than be disappointed or something that the corporate world is not happy to have me teach close quarter practices within their venues anymore. I mean, I mean, that's not going to stop me.
Yeah, I mean, that's another reason why I say personal protection. I generally use that term now because it's a much bigger spectrum, and it covers a wider number of subjects. Now, for instance, the immune system, to me, that is a natural personal protection system, and it does need to be looked after. It needs to be maintained, and so on and so forth. So, if you said to somebody that your immune system is part of a martial arts system, they might look at you a bit gone out. But in actual fact, like you said earlier about being healthy, especially with the state of, say, hospitals or GPs at the moment, it's very important that we look after our health as part of personal protection.
No, exactly. But that then again ties into natural mechanics.
Yeah.
So you can easily train fighters that are strong and competent, but that have had no linkage within their training to to kind of natural body mechanics and training methods that that make you actually stronger. I mean, a lot of professional fighters, they're not strong. I mean, they're fit, and they're fit to fight. Whatever it is they're steamed towards to, a 4-minute MMA bout or this or that. But I mean, and it's not just in the martial arts field. I mean, recently over the last couple of years, I mean, you keep on hearing, professional footballer, heart attack, professional this. I mean, one after the other falls down on the pitch sometimes. So clearly, just being a professional sports person, does not equal, having been trained, with healthy training protocols. And I would argue that quite the opposite is true. And that again ties in with, if you're training to those kind of competitive goals, and if it's not an introspective journey, where you learn about your own strengths and limitations, and where you respect those limitations and don't push through them because there's money at stake, or ego at stake, or something like that. It's a completely different ball game. So again, as a coach, or as somebody who's kind of done the work, I would like to. That's what I would like to bring forward. To distinguish. To distinguish those concepts, that are kind of spiritless or soulless, even sometimes. If you look at some of the images of some of the, fighters that we've seen over the last couple of years, I mean, what does that have to do with, with martial arts and self-protection? Nothing. It's destructive. It's self-destructive. It's destructive to the other person. It's destructive to the, to the industry. It's all destructive. And so then I'll come back to the non-aggression principle, which also incorporates, not being aggressive to yourself and respecting your own boundaries. But, to respect your own boundaries, you first need to find out what they are, right? So again, it becomes an introspective journey partly, about learning about yourself, who you are,
it's very holistic.
Yeah,
So,
very
yeah,
holistic, and you know, like the term that you hear in you know in the Far East, you know, like Zen in motion. You know, it's um, that kind of signifies that, you know, it's not necessarily about the external threat. It's about strengthening yourself. You know, being physically strong, being mentally strong, being resilient. You know, and being able to connect with, you know, with yourself. You know, with others, with nature, with, you know, with the universe. I mean, it sounds a bit vague, but I don't think it is. You know.
no, it's very relevant. Right, that nicely leads me to another one of the questions that I will be asking all of the guests. Now, I'll preface the question just so you get a better understanding of what it is. Now, for all the years of my martial arts and personal protection practice, in various different disciplines, I've always come across this thing about, like, for instance, the martial art fraternity and the self-defense fraternity. There's always this thing about, it will never work on the street, and you got to train for real in order to cross it over into real life situations. Now, for me, when I was training, the risk of injury was real. Now, if I trained so real that I got injured, that's actually going to make me more vulnerable to if I was walking down the street and get attacked. So I came up with this concept many years ago where I called it the Katana versus the Shinai Dilemma. And this is when I was practicing the sword arts. Now, you can probably see behind me, I've got the Katana at the top, and they're actually Bokken, which are training swords.
Yeah.
And that symbolizes the concepts of training hard and for real versus playing and not getting injured. Now, my conclusion after many years is that there's benefits in both, and in the right context, they're both essential. But I'm always interested to hear what other instructors, what their views are on that, and how they actually train their students with regards to, you know, to going hard with no gloves, and, you know, if people aren't bleeding at the end of the class, it wasn't a good session. Or the opposite way, where, for instance, some will teach literal no contact, energetic movements, sort of Tai Chi or Ki based martial art systems. So you kind of got a spectrum of the hardcore and the very, very soft, gentle arts,
Yeah.
and everything in between. So yeah, I hope I preface that question quite well.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much to add. I think, like, you kind of, you know, I fully agree with everything you say. You know, I think neither extreme position are not very helpful. You know, I think too much focus on practicality, certainly with people that, you know, have not been conditioned to, you know, take those type of strenuous engagement, what you call it, concepts, is not helpful. You know, you're just going to injure people, and that's the end of it. But, you know, there has to be some meat and potatoes about it. You know, you can't expect to be developing functional skills if it's all hypothetical. You know, so I think it's you know, it depends on who you're working with. It depends on if, you know, people are naturally strong, you know, what age they have, but it certainly needs to be a combination of both. But again, I think it is important. I would say that you can't wait with the real thing too long, you know, sure. because then you're, you know, as a coach, then you're, you know, you're creating a false narrative, you know. So
yeah.
So I think it's important to, you know, to take safety, of course, you know, at the forefront, you know. So that needs to be discussed, and that needs to be made clear, you know, how you try to maintain safety within those contextual premises. But
And I would also say, like, especially during a pandemic, when the healthcare services are very limited. Well, they've kind of been limited over the last few years, but let's say more so in the last 18 months, that getting injured during training is probably not the best idea. Whereas maybe 20 years ago, getting injured in training wasn't a big deal.
No, I agree. Although that then, that then can also be used as an argument to, to touch upon the subject of taking the power back on those subjects. So I've made many visits to hospitals after training.
Sure.
And most of the time I was given painkillers and told to rest. So I think for the majority, unless we're talking about fractures, when it comes to strains and pulled muscles and concussions and stuff like that, I think there's a lot we can try to do ourselves, or with the help of professionals on those fields in more kind of alternative medicine settings, if I'm allowed to say that.
Yeah. So in terms of like, you're talking in terms of like learning some healing arts, how to heal the self, because
I think we should have a base. We all have a basic first aid kit at home, right? So I think if we decide that self-protection training protocols are something that we want to engage in on a regular basis, I think it makes sense to, certainly in these times, as you say, to have our first aid kits kind of equipped with the basic things that we might be needing after training, and have the knowledge, use ice, use certain ointments and balms, and simple massage techniques, stuff like that. Just understanding the physiology of simple strains. How long does it take for a muscle to heal? How long does it take for a ligament to heal? Being able to identify what structures have been affected, and I think those are pretty essential. And again, we've been those I think at some point in time those were kind of commonly understood aspects.
Definitely.
And we've been again detached from those, and we need to reconnect with all of it.
Yeah, I've got a very interesting story with regards to that, and this is pre-pandemic. I suffered a knee injury many years ago, and it came back to haunt me. And I had a lot of complications using the healthcare services, as in there was a long sort of waiting list, and through an administration error, I got put back to day one, so I had to wait again. Now, because of necessity, because I needed to get rid of the pain, I actually started looking into some certain breathing exercises. Now, I must add that I'm not a doctor and I'm not giving medical advice. This is something that I did myself. And if you do have any trouble physically, always seek medical advice from a professional. Anyway, so I got into these breathing exercises, and literally, it's like a miracle. It got rid of it. It got rid of the pain. Now, to the degree that when I finally got my MRI scan, the consultant said, "What are you taking for pain relief?" I said, "Nothing." He said, "Come on, you must be taking something." I said, "No, I'm not taking anything." He said, "You must be taking something. Looking at the MRI scan, you must be in such pain that you must need to take something." I said, "I'm not taking anything." I said, "If you really want to know what I did, I developed some breathing exercises." And the consultant literally just looked away. He refused to engage with me.
Well, you're not the first person that tells a story like that. I mean, there are several or more, or it's quite common for people to mention those things.
And the thing is, it's not like it's I made it up, or it's in my head, or it's my imagination. The MRI scans were there as evidence that I should be in such pain that I shouldn't be able to sit there and have a conversation with the consultant. And this was now probably about 2 years ago, and I haven't had any medical intervention or treatment or surgery or anything like that. So it was purely 100% natural remedy. So I'm not going to go now because there's nothing wrong with me. I mean, whether it comes back or whatever remains to be seen. But I'm not complaining, and I'm saving the healthcare services money, so it's a win-win.
Yeah, well, exactly. But I think as we're moving into this new era, as I said, it's important to reconnect with these things, and that includes understanding our own body. Understanding whether we're talking about martial arts technique and how to generate force, with the body that we have.
Yeah.
Or whether it comes to injuries, or whether it comes to general health, or whether it comes to immunity. We need to reconnect with the understanding of our own bodies. It's like I think it's a no-brainer, and whether doesn't mean that that should be your sole method of treating yourself if you're ill. But I think the reconnecting is just really important. Without that, I don't think we stand a solid chance in protecting ourselves.
Yeah, and we don't really have any excuse anymore, because we've got, with the technology, we have the capabilities of researching, looking at various different things. Although maybe certain historical things have been edited or deleted even, and with censorship, some things have been lost. But for the most part, there is a lot of stuff, a lot of information, especially with anatomy, physiology, how the body, mind functions, the immune system, how it functions. There's a lot of stuff we can actually look into.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. It's all out there. It's just not being put on your, in front of you, because it doesn't fit the narrative. It doesn't,
Yeah.
You're used to no one, within the system if you are self-sufficient.
Yeah. Well, for many years, I've always adopted the attitude with most things that there is nobody coming to save me. So, for instance, in my home, I work on the assumption that the fire services are not coming if there's a fire. So
Right.
what am I going to do? I also look at the ambulance service isn't coming to rescue me. So what protocols or plans do I have in place? There's no food. I can't go to the shops. And this is something that I think the lockdowns caught everybody out, or a lot of people out on, when it first kicked off last year, that because people were living with the assumption that tomorrow is going to be just like it was today, when in actual fact it changed literally within hours, days, weeks. It radically changed. There's nothing to say it's not going to happen again.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. But I think it's, in the end of the day, it's up to people themselves to recognize that there is a need for taking some action ourselves or not. A lot of people seem to not be so bothered about it.
I mean, in some ways, there's some good points to it, because it kind of forces everybody, or those that choose to actually up their game in terms of being independent. Which,
no, exactly. Yeah, I agree.
If you think that this social change is about control, I think for some it kind of backfired on those trying to control, because it inspired people to become independent or self-sufficient.
Oh yeah.
I mean, myself, I lost my gym because it was leased from a council premises. So I went and set one up off grid. I've lived off grid for 2 years, and this has given me confirmation that I made the right decision in 2019. Because at the time when I did it, my friend's family thought I was crazy. But now it makes a lot of sense. Now
it's not very uncommon nowadays.
Yeah, and I think the desire to live off grid. I'm involved with a lot of the prepper community, and their groups are growing, massively on a daily basis, with people looking for alternative ways of existing in the current and potentially what's coming down the pipeline. So that is it's a big consideration.
Yeah, no, exactly. So, who knows what the future brings? I think there's no reason not to ride this wave of, people's power, whether it manifests, through the cracks of the falling empire or not. It's like, people are taking the power back, and people have an interest into reconnecting, on all kinds of levels with each other, with themselves, with health practices, with understanding, their own biology, or and with self-protection protocols as well. So, I think it's great. Doesn't mean that there's.
How much of a surprise was 2020 to you personally? I mean, had you done any prior research? I know for some people that I've spoken to, and some people that even within the martial arts.
It doesn't surprise me anymore now. But I have to admit that it took me a couple of months to come to terms with what was happening.
Sure.
But now, by now, to me, it's all pretty clear, and I can see that, at least, I believe I can see that, it goes back a long time. It's not something that started in 2020. It's been a long time in the making, and and I've always kind of battled against it in my own way. It was just, it was just not so in your face, So, but yeah, that wasn't clear to me immediately. It took a little while for me to
you don't think this is going to go away, and you don't think this is just like a short-term phase? You think we are entering into like a new paradigm?
I think as I said, I think we're entering, a new, I think the fourth industrial revolution label suits me well, because it's clear to me that there's an attempt to digitalize the world,
Sure.
and and that includes merging biological systems with with digital systems.
Yeah.
And I think once you can identify that, everything kind of falls in place.
Sure.
Everything suddenly makes a lot of sense. Everything seems to be a piece of the puzzle to create that new society,
Yeah.
And so, it's hard for me, it's hard to understand how people can not see it.
Not see it, yeah.
And on a daily basis are faced with all these, not adding up things. It's like it's not rocket science, if you ask me. And
so you're the training that you're doing now, I mean, does that relate to what you see happening or coming? I mean,
because well, yes, but again, I don't want to fall in repetition. I just think the key to all of it is reconnecting.
Sure.
We have the reason that it's happening partly is because we're disconnected.
Connected, yeah.
And whether that disconnection has been deliberately achieved or not, those are all interesting, discussions. But the fact is we've been completely disconnected from nature, from what we are, and from each other. So to the first thing is we need to reground ourselves, settle our minds, and get back to our truths, and then from there we can, whilst keeping an eye on on our safety, which is why I'm kind of happy and excited to be within the business of self-protection, because I think we're going to need it the next couple of years. I think I would really urge people listening to to include self-protection training protocols within their within their daily or weekly activities. And again, I think I can help out simplify things and not make it something that takes too much time. Something that can fit it into all the other things that we need to do. We need to keep an eye on developments. We need to all the things that we need, right? That's the way I like to look at it. What do we need, right? We need water, we need food, we need shelter, we need we need healthy relationships, so all these things we need to monitor them, right? Like, is the water that we are having clean, and what if, like you say, what if the water supply would not be available anymore, same thing for food, same thing for shelter. So So we have a kind of a lot on our plate. So I think for self-protection practices, there's a good reason to keep it concise, and to offer people something that they can start working with kind of immediately. So I do the weekly meetings here in the park, but I also offer 20-minute video calls, and so I kind of try to deliver the concepts and then ask people to work with those concepts, and and I'll see you when I see you again, and then we'll work further. And so I think those are kind of, in my opinion, but of course I'm a martial artist, so I'm a little biased, but in my opinion those are kind of essential elements that we need to incorporate in our routines, and otherwise we're gonna pay the price, because I see a lot of people, for example, struggling mentally.
Sure.
This type of training, it really helps. It helps you kind of stabilize. It helps you stay positive. It helps you connect with others. Because don't forget, these kind of training practices, they're also a language, right? So again, for which reason I like the kind of 9-strike concept. They're little kind of languages that not only can serve our our ability to develop skills, but we can then connect with others and work with each other through this language, right? And I think it's a really important tool. And if you look at, of course, the role that martial arts played in ancient times, particularly in the in the Far East. They were quite complex survival, part of complex survival systems, and again the spiritual aspect was very important of it, like to understand your spiritual essence. So I can only recommend people to get started if they're not already engaged in it.
Something I'm recommending strongly with any possible chance I get is that to build up small networks, ideally through people that you train with, so on and so forth, and building up some kind of camaraderie and of like minds. This is something that the martial arts has always been able to do for the most part.
Exactly,
bring people together, and because to practice martial arts, somebody, it has to be a lot of trust that they're not just going to take the stick and poke it in your eye or whatever. So this, to me, it's a great way of networking and developing small groups, syndicates, whatever you want to call it. I always say to people, look, we'll start with one person, build it up to 4, build it up to 8. 8's a good number of 8 people that you can trust. Same as in the military. It's the same principle.
Yeah, and it provides you with a counter strategy against isolation as well. A lot of people are feeling isolated, nervous about things, and so all these things that you just mentioned. They've been martial arts sales slogans for a long time, but to me they kind of really light up now. They mean so much more in 2021, if you ask me, than they did in 2018.
There's another thing I have noticed with your training, and it's very similar to my own practice, is that you train outdoors. You train. We call it environmental training. I don't know if you're aware, but my main business is actually protection dogs. So part of that is environmental training. Now, the environment is very, very important for dogs. Well, I think for everybody, but let's say for dog training, environmental training is very, very important, because a dog may perform well in a certain place on certain surfaces, but then not perform because you've changed the environment. So one of the things that we do is that we expose the dog to as many different environments as possible. And this will include slippery floors, elevated, being on the first, second, third floor of a building, on the grass, in mud, gravel, metal stairs, things like this. Now, going back to the point, I've seen that you train outdoors, and now I personally think that this is actually a great opportunity that we've been able to get out of the dojos, gyms, indoor environments, to be actually out outdoors in potentially the environments that we may find ourselves in where we need the personal protection. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I agree. Although, I ended up outdoors more than, I didn't have a choice because,
Yeah.
The studio where I was operating full time, didn't want me back really, because of the close quarter. Because I wasn't going not to, have any contact,
Sure. Yeah.
or put a mask on, at the entrance until I reached the mats,
Yeah.
So that was the end of it, and so it's not exactly by choice that I ended up in the parks, but I enjoy being in the parks. To be honest, I don't think I would want to be going back indoors anytime soon.
No, I enjoy it. I find it really helps me connect to nature. Training outdoors. I've always been. Do you know what? I've always been an outdoor fanatic. 30 years ago, I used to take my students out to the woods, and a lot of them used to complain, and a lot of them didn't used to turn up because maybe it was a bit cold or it was raining or whatever.
Yeah,
so I used to love it. Now, training outdoors for a lot of people has become actually the new normal in some ways.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's always a silver line in every cloud, in my opinion.
Yeah, and also it kind of like it separates the people that you don't really probably be wanting to work with from those that you do. People say like, well, where are your mats? So it's not safe or this or that. Yeah, it's probably not for you.
Okay. Well, look, we're going to wrap it up soon. Now, there is a couple more questions. One is, I'm going to give you one top tip that if you want to communicate to the listeners, one top tip that you can give them from your personal experience or your teachings. Go for it.
Well, I would say, get ready to fight, It's the name of the channel I run on Telegram. I'm there to share my ideas and experiences. I've put together, I think, a neat little system that gets you kick-started and gets you straight to the point. Which I think is really important. There's lots out there, and there's lots of good stuff out there. There's lots of not so good stuff out there as well. But it's important to have a little roadmap and to start something that has the potential to build up from, and has the potential to bring the best out of you individually, rather than create a clone of someone else. So I think that's
so like a sense of urgency. You mean, is that you're referring to?
I do think there's a sense of urgency. I think there certainly is a sense of urgency. It's kind of now or never. We need to we if we don't reconnect, then we're it's pretty clear where this fourth industrial revolution is leading to, I think.
Sure.
So let's rather than bang our head against the potential nasty outcomes of such a venture, let's use it as a as an inspiration to get back to certain connections that we've lost over the years.
Yeah.
So I think that's my top tip.
Right, great stuff. Unless there's anything for more that you want to add, I'll give you the opportunity to tell people how they can contact you. If you want, I can put links in the show notes underneath.
Yeah, no. So I run a channel on Telegram called Get Ready to Fight. Everyone's welcome to.
And that's with a 2.
That's
number
right.
2. Number 2, yeah. Okay.
I can also be found on Telegram for my music project under my name, Mees Rozen. And once again, we run the weekly meetings here in East London, in Hackney, but I'm available for video calls as well.
Sure.
That has that is working pretty well. So if you're further out, please do get in touch, and I look forward to working with anyone who's interested.
Yeah, great stuff. Well, I'll add your details in the show notes. So for those watching this video, if you want to get in touch, then look in the show notes. So we'll wrap it up there. And I just want to thank you very much for taking the time out to share your knowledge and information on this new platform.
I hope it was helpful. Thank you for having me.
No, it's a pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, some really good information. And you've actually given me a few things to think about. So I appreciate that. I'm always a student. And yeah, we're always learning stuff. So, and that's another part of this platform, is that we want, obviously, the listeners to learn something. We also want potentially the martial art industry and the personal protection industry to pick up tips and information and things like that, because for a lot of us, we've been a little bit isolated in some way or another. And it's a great, well, this platform will be a great mechanism to share a lot of knowledge and inspiration. So
great. Well, I look forward to hearing more about it and hearing other speakers. And thanks once again for having me, Lee.
Yeah, and also in the future, there's nothing to say you're not going to come back on.
All right.
I really enjoyed it, and appreciate that you've taken the time. And
thanks very much.
Yep, I wish you all the best down in East London.
Thank you, sir.
All right, you're welcome.
Bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.